Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name's Harry Bell. I will be your host for this podcast series called the MSK Runner Podcast. So, just remember to please like and subscribe on the YouTube and on the Spotify. Just before we get into this episode, just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who listened to the first episode and also sent me messages saying that you found it really enjoyable, really insightful. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I was not expecting this at all, but really good to know that quite a few of you listened to it and hopefully enjoyed it. So yeah, basically this is going to come out every Sunday night at 6 o'clock. So you'll have something fresh to listen to every week. And like I say, if there's any topics that you want me to talk about, or if you have any questions, then please just comment below or send me a DM on Instagram, and I will do my very best to kind of answer those questions for you. So yeah, I've actually this is episode 2. I actually recorded episode 3 already, which will come out this time next week. I've got a guest on episode 3, which I'm really excited for you all to listen to, and I know that I certainly really enjoyed recording it. So yeah, that's one to look forward to. Gonna cover all sorts of topics over the next few weeks and over the next few months. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing this all with you guys, and hopefully, like I say, you enjoy it. So today, yeah, we're going to talk about something that's really taken off in the UK over the last year or two. Something that's become really, really popular, but not without its pitfalls and its consequences, and that is fat loss injections. So as I touched on in the previous episode, obesity a massive, massive problem in our country. I think it's, if I remember rightly, 33% of adults aged 16 plus are obese, and I think it's around 66-ish% are either overweight or obese. So it's a huge problem in our country, and not to mention that obesity can lead on to other really bad health conditions later down the line, including heart disease, high blood pressure, arthritis, and a few other bits and bats. Type 2 diabetes as well is a common one. So yeah, it is an issue that does need tackling. And what the government and the NHS particularly want to do to combat obesity is using fat loss injections, which I like to call a cheat code. For me, the only time cheat codes ever work is when you're playing Grand Theft Auto, and that's not real life. Really should not use cheat codes in real life, because it's going to, like I say earlier, not going to come without its consequences, its pitfalls, and in the case of drugs, side effects. So your fat loss injections, Mounjaro is probably the most common one that we've all probably heard of. They contain a hormone called GLP-1, and that basically regulates your appetite, your digestion, and your blood sugar levels. So basically, it keeps you feeling fuller for longer when you take these injections. And obviously, that means your appetite reduces, you're not going to eat as much, and then you're going to lose weight. So yeah, you do get the short-term results in terms of you do lose quite a lot of weight drastically, but like I say, it doesn't come without its consequences. Now, in the past year, around 1.6 million people in the UK have used fat loss injections. So that's just over 1 in 70 people. It's quite a high number. And I think certainly if the NHS and Wes Street and the Health Secretary get their way, that number's only going to massively increase over the next year or so, or perhaps even the next few months. So basically, recently, over the last week or so, kind of in the news, the government announced that GP surgeries are going to be incentivized by receiving a bonus of £3,000 per year to prescribe fat loss injections to NHS patients. Now, I don't really think £3,000 is going to be that much of an incentive for a GP surgery, because that amount of money is kind of like a drop in the ocean. So in that sense, it doesn't really make sense. But what it certainly does show is the intent from the government to try and get more and more people, as in NHS patients, on those fat loss injections to try and curb obesity and reduce the strain and the pressure on the NHS. So it's all kind of that's the hypothesis, and that's sort of what they want to achieve. But it's just, it's just not going to come without consequences, I'm afraid to say. Like I say, Wes Streeting, he wants it on the NHS more and more, because he thinks that people should have access based on need, not just like ability to pay. Because as I've said, like the vast majority of those 1.6 million people on the fat loss injections go privately rather than like through the NHS and through their GPs. Now, in terms of like privately, Morrison's supermarket, for example, which we're all familiar of, you can actually buy fat loss injections from them. So £149 for the first month and then £169 per month afterwards for weekly injections. So yeah, it's a lot of money, but it just goes to show you can buy them like pretty much over the counter. Another problem is that like there's lots of like unregulated retailers, which are using inverted commas for people listening on the audio, because you can buy these sorts of like medications kind of from like your hairdressers or your barbers or wherever, from like a backstreet alleyway type thing. I just think that's really scary because you don't know what's going to be in them drugs, particularly when you go through like an unlicensed retailer, should I say. If you were to like, you wouldn't buy like normal medication like an inhaler for asthma or an EpiPen, for example, from your local village Avon sales rep, would you? Because that would just be really stupid. So you wouldn't, therefore, why would you do that with fat loss injections? Is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, the problem is as well is that like there's loads and loads of side effects. So yes, what I mean by like cheat code is that like yeah, you inject yourself and over a short period of time, you do get short-term results, and a lot of your weight does get shifted, albeit so does muscle mass as well, which is not a good thing because lack of muscle mass increases frailty risks when you get into like later life. But in terms of like the side effects on fat loss injections, I'm sure you've all sort of heard stuff about it on the news, on social media, and things like that. I read an article on the diabetes.co.uk website, and in January last year, a study involving over 2 million patients found that like people using fat loss injections double their risk of developing pancreatitis, increased risk of nausea, arthritis, and insomnia. Also, like lowering your blood pressure, like too low, and kidney stones, and even feeling fainted as well. Over 120 hospitalizations in January 2025 alone due to these, due to these like medications and side effects. Other side effects includes like fatigue and tiredness, hypoglycemia, so like low blood sugar, for example, gallbladder problems, vomiting, headaches, you name it. There's like lots and lots of side effects from taking these drugs. And I don't think there's enough education, enough research, and enough regulations into these fat loss injections. But they're like being handed out to people like sweets over a counter. It's just really not good enough. And I think it's actually, yeah, you get the short-term results, but actually long-term, it'll make your health even worse in a lot of cases. I just think like before like giving these out, there needs to be a hell of a lot more research into them, particularly in the side effects. I also think like it needs to be regulated. So yeah, in a way, I kind of do agree with Wes Street, and I do think if you're going to get fat loss injections, it needs to be through the NHS. But having said that, I personally don't agree with fat loss injections as a strategy to lose weight or lose body fat, because it's simply not sustainable. And that's before we even get to the side effects. I think it's also like very concerning. People with eating disorders in particular, can relapse. That's whether, people who are like anorexic, for example, or suffer with bulimia, to put them on fat loss injections is quite scary, really. And I do think there needs to be kind of like age restrictions as well. So like, for example, at my workplace last week, one of my colleagues did like a gym consultation with like a mother and daughter, and I don't know how old the mum was, but I think the daughter was like 17 or 18 or something like that. And the mum was already on fat loss injections, and she was going to get her daughter to use them as well. And I just think that's, really bad and really like ill-advised, and just a complete lack of education. and a lack of awareness and consideration for like the bigger picture and the long term. I just find it really frightening and really scary. As I touched on earlier, losing muscle mass is a side effect, and also like within a year of stopping the medication or like reducing the dosage, you do end up putting the weight back on that you originally lost anyway. So that's what I mean by it being like not sustainable. So that's kind of like my rant on weight loss injections. I think there needs to be more regulation, more research before they get dished out. And I just think like much more can be done, like something different can be done to help to help people lose weight. So, I think a lot of things, especially on the internet and on social media, lots of things become like too overly complicated when actually it can be made a lot more simple. So I think in terms of losing weight, it's kind of a very simple formula. What you want to do is work out your basal metabolic rate, and then you want to use that to work out your total daily energy expenditure. So you've got your BMR calculators and your TDEE calculators. Like you can find them on Google very quickly. Just type in like your details, and it will tell you kind of like roughly how many calories you need to consume per day based on how active you are. So that's kind of, obviously nothing's ever going to be 100% accurate, but it should be there as like a rough guide. And you can do this just through like basic, nutrition and also living an active, healthy lifestyle. And you can lose weight and you can lose body fat without injecting yourself full of stuff that you don't know what's going to do to your body further down the line, and, potential catastrophic effects on your health. So I think like in terms of like calories, now I'm not saying you have to like obsessively calorie count or weigh your food or anything like that, but in terms of like your calories to lose weight, to lose body fat, you need to be in what's called a calorie deficit. I think it's very important to highlight that, a calorie deficit. So basically it's basically where the calories out outweighs your calories in. So say for example, if you consume 2,000 calories per day and your calorie expenditure is 2,200 calories on that day, then that means you're in a deficit of 200 calories. So if you keep going with that, your body fat and your weight will decrease. What you don't want to fall into the trap of is kind of like massively reducing your calories, because what you don't want is to like, you'll end up like feeling too hungry, feeling too tired, feeling too depressed, and then it becomes not sustainable. So you just want to reduce your calories a little by little each time, and then basically that becomes more sustainable. It's less adjusting for your body to make, and then you get those longer term results. So yeah, I think that's kind of like in a nutshell the best thing to do. Just like keep an eye sort of like on your calories, and particularly like your body fat percentage as well, which is more important than your weight. So like your body fat percentage and your muscle mass as well, because if your weight stays the same but your body fat percentage goes down and your muscle mass goes up, then that's actually a good thing, because the more muscle mass you have, as I touched on earlier, the less likely you are to get injured, the stronger you are, and then also like it reduces like risk of frailty, further down the line in life. So yeah, you can't obviously like getting that right balance of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, your micronutrients, so your vitamins and minerals. There's no like one size fits all answer. We're all different shapes and sizes. We all have different lifestyles. Some are more active than others, some are less active than others. But like I say, using that total daily energy expenditure calculator does give you a rough guide on how much you need to eat based on how active you are. So my advice would be to use that as a guide, and you can achieve weight loss and fat loss through basic, not complicated nutrition and physical activity levels and exercise, rather than injecting yourself full of the unknown. So that's kind of like where I am with the fat loss injections. I think, people successfully lost weight 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before any of us had even heard of GLP-1s and Mounjaro. So I just think the government needs to focus more on education in terms of basic nutrition and increasing physical activity levels rather than just injecting people full of stuff. I don't think that's the answer. Yes, it might give you like short-term results, but long-term, there's a very good chance that you're going to get side effects and possibly develop, more like health conditions and decrease your quality of life. And nobody wants that. We want our health to be better, not worse. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And if Wes Streeting's listening to this, which he probably won't be, but yeah, I think there's a better way to go about it than just simply like handing out injections like hotcakes. So that's my rant over about fat loss injections in a nutshell. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to read out some questions that some of you sent in. So Ryan Hill has sent me a couple of questions again, so cheers for that, Ryan, and we're one step closer to seeing you back in the gym again. So yeah, looking forward to that. First question is what to look for in running shoes, which is a good question. So I think like if you're like a top high-end athlete, people go for like, your carbon plated shoes, and that does make a difference to performance. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think that's necessary. Like me, for example, like when it comes to running, like I'm just an average Joe type guy. I'm certainly not a professional athlete. So, wearing carbon plated running shoes probably wouldn't benefit me at all, to be honest with you. So like I always for like years and years wore Nike shoes, but then recently since about August, September onwards, I've started wearing Hokas or Hokas, however you pronounce it. And I've just found them like really good. What I look for in running shoes basically is that they're comfortable and my feet don't hurt when I'm running in them. And that's just as simple as that, really. Like as long as you find a pair of shoes that are comfortable for you, that's kind of all you really need, really. And you don't necessarily need to spend like 150 quid or 200 quid on a pair of running shoes. Like I think I've got 2 pairs of Hokas, and I think they were bear in mind, I was kind of like brought up in Yorkshire. So anytime I do like online shopping, I kind of go on like Google and chat GPT and look for like discount codes, by the way, try and get the cheapest deal possible. But yeah, I tend to spend kind of around 90 to 100 quid on a pair of running shoes. I just think like comfort is the most important thing. And obviously if they look good, then even better. So yeah, that's what I look for in running shoes. And then your other question is running topless woke nonsense? To be honest with you, I'll let you guys decide that one. But yeah, it is. Right, anyway, a question from my mate Max in Hambleton. What are my thoughts on training apps? Are they an aid to help you get to know what you're capable of, or do they just push you towards injury? So cheers for that, Max. Doing Chicago Marathon together in October, so really looking forward to that. And we won't mention the Chicago 5K the day before. But anyway, yeah, so in terms of like running apps, so yeah, I use an app called Runner, so RUNNA. Yes, so I've used it since last year. I'll carry on using it until like July, August, because that's when my subscription runs out. So I might as well carry on using it. I have found it like a really useful tool, and I do think it's very useful for beginners as well. In terms of pushing you towards injury, there is an argument for that. And I think a lot of people have said this about Runner, where basically sessions are like a bit too frequent and also a little bit too intense as well. That's what other people kind of like, if you read Instagram, have like kind of reported. Me, myself, like personally, so this time last year, I was training for Manchester Marathon and I used the Runner app for the first time. And like for me personally, I had problems with one of my knees at the time, and it wanted me to do like a long run every week. So when I say long run, I'm talking like at least 25k. So what I actually did kind of in the second half of my training block is I modified it a little bit. So rather than do like one long run per week, I did one every other week. And that definitely helped because the last thing I wanted was to like get to the start line and already be injured. So yeah, to kind of answer that question, I think it's important, like when you enter your details and information on these types of apps, that you give it as much information about yourself as possible. And also in terms of like how often you want to train, like, the fit principle, frequency, intensity, time and type of sessions as well. Um, yeah, I do use my runner training plan kind of like as a rough guide, but I wouldn't follow it by the letter like religiously. So like sometimes I might do a shorter run, or sometimes like I say, every other week I'll skip a long run just because like I don't want to get injured is my main goal. So yeah, I do think like overall, running apps are very helpful and everybody would benefit from using them. Um, I think in terms of like, does it push you towards injury? I think that's kind of like your call to make. So if you feel like you're injured, then maybe just kind of like look at reducing the frequency and the intensity of your sessions, basically, and kind of like go off your own judgment. But I mean, playing devil's advocate, if I had been training for my marathon without using a running gap, my knee problem 99.9% still would have occurred. So I'm definitely like not blaming any running gaps for that. But yeah, there is kind of a narrative that they do tend to cause injuries. I think before I really have a solid opinion on it, I think more research, wider research, needs to be done into it. I was actually talking to mate Jack last weekend when we did a run together, and he was talking about like ChatGPT, how one of his mates had like put in ChatGPT like what event he was training for, how often he wanted to train, blah blah blah. Basically like it was pretty much identical to a runner training program. So ChatGPT can be good, but also one thing I will say about ChatGPT and AI in general is like they do get things wrong. So I would emphasize that you do need to like feed it as much information as with as much detail as possible. I mean, like for example, when it comes like I'm going off on the tangent by the way, but when it comes to like ChatGPT, when I've done like working in the gym, for example, and doing programs, so just kind of like as an experiment, really, I'll type somebody's kind of like medical conditions on ChatGPT. And basically, I'd put that somebody had high blood pressure, and it still gave me like overhead press, for example, and lat pull down. So basically, anyone with high blood pressure shouldn't do like any overhead exercises, such as the two that I just mentioned, or isometric exercises, such as doing the planks. So like that's what I mean when I say that ChatGPT and AI like do get things wrong. So you just need to be wary. You can't just like take it at face value. You do need to like know your stuff and do your research as well. And yeah, you do need to an extent take it with a pinch of salt, but definitely use your own judgment as well. So yeah, cheers for the question with that one, Max, as well. And that is kind of all the questions we have, really. So yeah, I don't even know how long I've been recording this for, to be honest. But yeah, it feels short anyway, but hopefully quality over quantity in that one. So yeah, for episode 3, which will come out next week, really good because I had the first guest on it and we recorded it the other day. So he's called Paweł Soliński. He is so he does like triathlons, and he's also done Ironmans as well. And he actually won a triple ultra Ironman last year, which is like really incredible. And his story is like really insightful, really inspiring. And like I said earlier, I really enjoyed recording it with him. So I really hope you guys enjoy listening to it as well. So yeah, that's enough for me today. I'm wearing my Arsenal shirt, by the way, because we beat Brighton 1-0 last night, and Man City drew at Forest, and hopefully Tottenham get relegated as well, which is looking, not out of the question. So yeah, in a good mood in terms of how football going. But then saying that, like by the time this episode actually gets published, it might be a different story because it's Thursday night as I'm recording this. But yeah. Like I say, anything you want me to talk about, put it in the comments below, and I will see you next week for Paweł's episode. Cheers, everyone. Take care.